Introduction. We've all experienced emotional pain, especially when it comes from someone we once trusted or cared for deeply. But what if I told you that the most powerful way to respond isn't through tears, revenge, or emotional outbursts, but through strategy, self-respect, and quiet confidence? When a man hurts you, the most instinctive response might be to cry, confront, or lash out. These reactions, while human, often only serve to feed the emotional drama that benefits no one, least of all you. The real strength lies in doing the opposite, maintaining emotional composure. This is not about suppressing your feelings or pretending that you're unaffected. Rather, it's about choosing not to give your emotions away freely to someone who has not handled them with care. Emotional composure is a discipline. It requires a level of self-awareness and maturity that signals, both to yourself and to others, that your emotions are not for public display or manipulation. When someone causes you emotional pain, particularly someone you were vulnerable with, your silence and stability become your most effective tools. Why? Because most people expect a reaction. They anticipate your emotional upheaval as proof that they've left an impact. But when you give them nothing, no tears, no rage, no desperate attempts to be heard, it's unsettling. You immediately shift the dynamic from victim to sovereign. You move from being someone who is hurt to someone who is observing, choosing, and controlling the narrative. This doesn't mean you're not allowed to feel deeply. You are, but the critical distinction lies in where and how you choose to process those feelings. Emotional composure means you take those raw emotions behind closed doors into a journal, a therapy session, a long walk, or even a quiet bath. You let your internal world unravel in safety, while externally you remain poised and self-contained. This confuses the person who hurt you because it removes the fuel they often expect: attention, validation, or emotional feedback. Moreover, emotional control is not just a response tactic, it's a long-term strategy. It reinforces your identity as someone who values her peace above all else. You become less reactive and more reflective. This emotional maturity also helps you spot patterns early on. Instead of being swept away by someone's charm or temporary remorse, you're grounded enough to observe whether actions align with words. And if they don't, you don't argue. You simply step away. Men, like anyone, are not immune to emotional patterns. When they cause harm, whether intentionally or through neglect, they often expect a cycle to follow: hurt, confrontation, apology, reconciliation, repeat. But if you interrupt that cycle by refusing to engage emotionally, you break the pattern. You quietly communicate, "I saw what you did, and I have nothing left to say." That sentence, even if unspoken, carries more weight than any argument ever could. This kind of composure is also a direct reflection of self-respect. When you hold yourself in high regard, you refuse to let others drag you into emotional chaos. You don't explain yourself endlessly. You don't beg for understanding, and you certainly don't stay where your dignity is compromised. Emotional restraint becomes your shield. It protects your energy, your time, and most importantly, your identity. Now, let's talk about the psychological effect this has not just on the person who hurt you, but on you as well. For them, your stillness becomes uncomfortable. It forces them to reflect, even if just subconsciously. They are no longer receiving emotional validation, even in the form of anger or sadness, and that absence is louder than any confrontation. For you, composure builds emotional muscle. Every time you resist the urge to react, you grow stronger. You begin to trust yourself more. You prove to yourself that you can survive pain without losing your values, your grace, or your sense of self. One of the most empowering things you can do after being hurt is to become unpredictable. Emotional predictability, crying when expected, pleading when abandoned, becomes a pattern that people learn to take for granted. But when you replace that pattern with stillness, observation, and inner strength, you become enigmatic. You confuse those who thought they could read you, and in that space of confusion, they are left to face themselves, while you move forward in silence, purposefully and without apology. There's also an important distinction to make between emotional composure and emotional suppression. The former is a choice made from a place of strength. The latter is a defense mechanism rooted in fear. When you are composed, you are not denying your emotions. You are choosing not to weaponize them. You are choosing dignity over drama, and that choice alone elevates you. Over time, emotional composure also improves your relationships, not just romantic ones, but professional and social ones as well. People respect those who carry themselves with calm authority. They may not always understand it, but they feel it. You are no longer easily provoked. You're no longer easily shaken. You become someone who can be trusted with complexity because you do not collapse under pressure. When a man hurts you and you respond with composure, you don't just protect your heart. You protect your future. You send a message to yourself and the world. I am not defined by how others treat me. I am defined by how I respond. That message is powerful. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need to be posted online or shouted in a voice message. It exists in your posture, in your silence, in your restraint, and it speaks volumes. In conclusion, emotional composure is your most elegant form of self-defense. It is a reflection of your emotional intelligence and a marker of true self-worth. When someone hurts you, especially someone you once allowed close to your heart, confuse them not with chaos, but with calm. With dignity, with absence, with the quiet confidence of a woman who knows that her peace is more valuable than any temporary validation. Because in the end, power doesn't scream, it whispers, and often it walks away. Silence, when used with intention, is one of the most disarming tools a woman can use when someone hurts her. Most people underestimate its power because they assume that being silent is the same as being passive. But that assumption is flawed. Strategic silence is not about weakness or avoidance. It is about restraint, power, and message control. It is a conscious decision to withhold your energy from someone who no longer deserves it. And in that decision lies your strength. When someone wounds you emotionally, especially someone close like a romantic partner, they often anticipate a range of responses. They might expect tears, confrontation, emotional arguments, or even dramatic exits. But silence is unsettling. It denies them the script they were prepared for. It forces them to sit with what they've done without your emotional labor softening the blow or giving them a platform for explanation. Your absence becomes a mirror reflecting their behavior back at them, stark and uninterrupted. Silence is not just the absence of sound. It is the presence of intention. It says, I could speak, but I choose not to. That choice is where the confusion begins. People who hurt others often rely on reaction to feel powerful or validated. When they get none, no fight, no begging, no attempts to fix things, it disturbs the cycle. It introduces uncertainty. Why isn't she reacting? Is she over it already? Is she planning something? These questions, though unspoken, start to take root in their mind, and as they spiral through that uncertainty, you remain steady, quiet, focused on your peace. This doesn't mean you're pretending not to care. It means you care about yourself enough to not waste energy on reactions that will change nothing. You realize that most of what we say in emotional chaos isn't productive, it's performative. It's about seeking closure, validation, or justice from someone who may not be capable or willing to provide it. Instead, silence provides your closure. You close the door without needing their understanding or apology. You exit the conversation, the cycle, the dynamic, with dignity intact. The beauty of silence is that it speaks on your behalf, and what it says is entirely shaped by your poise. For a woman who has developed herself emotionally, socially, and intellectually, her silence is not emptiness. It is full of presence, it holds history, values, discernment, and people feel it. Silence after disrespect becomes a boundary. Silence after betrayal becomes a verdict. Silence after manipulation becomes liberation. Another way silence becomes powerful is through withdrawal, not just verbal but energetic. You stop checking in, you stop being available, you stop reacting to messages or attempts to provoke. Instead of explaining your boundaries, you embody them. You let the silence draw a line they cannot cross, and the confusion that follows is often their first true consequence. People grow used to access, especially when it comes to emotional availability. When you remove that access without aggression, only clarity, it often makes a deeper impact than words ever could. This approach also supports your emotional healing. Silence protects you from the backhand force that reopen wounds. It stops you from entering pointless debates or false reconciliations. It gives you the space to process privately on your terms without the noise of someone else's narrative trying to control yours. Silence puts you in the driver's seat of your recovery. It says, "I choose me." And sometimes that is the only statement that matters. From a psychological perspective, humans are pattern-seeking creatures. When we break a pattern, especially one that involves emotional interaction, it causes disruption. A man who is used to pushing buttons to get a response now finds the buttons don't work. He tries once, twice, 3 times, and still nothing. That silence doesn't just confuse him, it educates him. Whether he learns or not is his choice, but your silence has already delivered the message. Access to me is not guaranteed, especially after harm. It's also important to know that strategic silence does not mean you never speak. It means you choose when and how to speak. You speak through your actions, through your elevation, through how you carry yourself after, through what you no longer tolerate. If you decide to address the issue at some point, it will be from a place of clarity, not emotional impulse. Your silence gives you that space to gain perspective, rather than being swept into a cycle of emotional reactivity. In a world that constantly encourages women to explain, defend, and justify their emotions, choosing silence is revolutionary. It reclaims your energy from people who drain it. It forces others to do their own emotional labor instead of outsourcing it to you. It disrupts patterns that feed on your vulnerability, and most importantly, it allows you to hear yourself, your own intuition, your own boundaries, your own truth. Silence also positions you above the noise. It creates a contrast. While others might resort to blame, deflection, or public displays of drama, your quiet withdrawal signals inner strength. It shows that you do not need chaos to feel significant. You do not need to win an argument to feel seen. You simply remove yourself, and in doing so, you take the power with you, and the silence doesn't have to be forever. It's not about ghosting or avoidance. It's about holding space for self-reflection, for boundaries to be respected, for you to determine whether the relationship or even the interaction is still worthy of your presence. If and when you return on your terms. If you never do, your absence speaks with the volume of 1,000 words you never had to say. So the next time someone hurts you, consider not rushing to respond. Instead, pause, breathe, step back. Say nothing, Let your silence carry the weight of what your words cannot. Let it become the unfamiliar silence that speaks louder than confrontation, because sometimes the most confusing thing you can do to someone who expected to break you is to remain still, silent, and stunningly unbothered. When someone wounds you emotionally, your natural instinct might be to seek answers, validation, or even revenge. But what if, instead of looking outward, you redirected all that energy inward? One of the most powerful and confusing responses you can give to someone who has hurt you is not begging for their attention or stooping to their level. It is elevating your life in every aspect. When you invest in yourself after being hurt, you shift the focus from reaction to transformation. You stop trying to change the person who wronged you, and instead you change the narrative of your own story, elevating your lifestyle and sense of self. Worth sends a silent, undeniable message. You are not broken, you are rebuilding, and better than before. This elevation isn't about showing off or posting highlight reels for public consumption. It's about personal growth that is real, grounded, and lasting. When you start prioritizing yourself, your health, your goals, your happiness, you step back into your power. And nothing is more confusing to someone who expected you to stay in a place of pain than watching you thrive without them. There is a kind of beauty that arises from heartbreak when it is alchemized into growth. Pain, when channeled properly, becomes a catalyst. It sharpens your focus. It redefines your standards. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself you may have neglected while trying to nurture someone else. Instead of asking why they hurt you, you begin asking, what do I want next? What version of me have I delayed becoming because I was too busy settling for less? This is where elevation begins, not in trying to prove your worth to anyone else, but in realizing it for yourself. You start to invest time and energy into your personal development. Perhaps you take up a new hobby, enroll in a course, or begin a fitness journey not for aesthetic reasons, but to reconnect with your body and mind. You might curate your environment, declutter your space, upgrade your wardrobe, refine your circle. These may seem like small steps, but collectively they become a statement. I choose me. There's also an emotional and intellectual elevation that occurs. You become more selective, not just with partners, but with conversations, commitments, and energies. You learn to say no, not from a place of bitterness, but from a place of self-respect. You surround yourself with people who support your growth rather than shrink your potential. You stop needing to be chosen and start choosing yourself every day in every decision. The confusion this creates in someone who hurt you is rooted in contrast. They expected decline, not ascent. They expected breakdowns, not breakthroughs. Watching you glow, evolve, and succeed without seeking their approval or presence creates a dissonance they can't quite reconcile. It forces them to recognize that their absence did not destroy you, it liberated you. And that reality is far more impactful than any confrontation could ever be. This transformation also rebalances the power dynamic. When you elevate your life after being hurt, you remove the leverage they thought they had. You show them, without needing to say a word, that they are not the center of your world. They were a chapter, not the entire story, and your story, as it unfolds, becomes richer, deeper, and more beautiful without them in the lead role. That alone can be deeply unsettling to someone who assumed you wouldn't move on without them. More importantly, this journey of elevation is not for them, it is for you. It is a declaration to yourself that you will no longer abandon your needs, dreams, and standards for the comfort of anyone else. You realize that your healing is not dependent on their remorse or return. You do not wait for closure or apologies. Instead, you rise quietly, consistently, authentically, and this type of elevation is not loud. It doesn't have to be broadcast to be valid. The deepest form of growth happens in silence, when you wake up earlier, read more, eat better, pray deeper, and surround yourself with peace. These internal shifts manifest externally over time. People will start to notice the glow, the confidence, the grace. And by then, you won't need to explain anything. Your presence will speak for itself. Even your energy changes. You begin to attract different kinds of people, those who see your value without you having to prove it. You find yourself no longer drawn to chaos because your nervous system has learned to crave calm. You understand that real power is not in how loudly you respond to disrespect, but in how quietly you walk away and build a life that reflects your worth. There is something undeniably magnetic about a woman who has been hurt and still chooses to rise with elegance. She becomes untouchable, not because she is guarded, but because she is grounded. She knows who she is, what she deserves, and she will never again make herself small for someone else's comfort. That kind of transformation is not only confusing to those who underestimated her, it's inspiring to those watching from afar. So if someone has hurt you, let their actions be the spark that lights your evolution. Let the pain fuel your personal refinement. Let the disappointment redirect you to your higher path. And most of all, let your elevation be your quiet response. Not to prove anything to them, but to honor everything about you. Because your comeback isn't just about getting better, it's about becoming untouchable, unstoppable, and undeniably whole. When someone hurts you, especially in a romantic context, it's easy to believe that the only effective response is to match the energy, returning hurt with hurt, anger with anger, or disrespect with revenge. But emotional mastery is not about mirroring pain. It's about choosing a different level. One of the most intelligent and disorienting responses you can offer someone who expected a dramatic reaction is to respond with class, not clashes. When you rise above the emotional battlefield and operate with elegance, calm, and clarity, you shift the dynamic in a way that they cannot anticipate or easily decode. Responding with class does not mean suppressing your emotions or pretending everything is fine. It means honoring your emotions privately, then stepping into action publicly with maturity and grace. There is a difference between expressing your feelings and leaking them uncontrollably. The person who hurt you does not deserve access to your inner chaos. They do not deserve the power to see you unravel. What they do deserve, however, is to see that their actions did not rob you of your dignity. Dignity is the anchor of a classy response. It reminds you that even when you are hurt, you are still whole. You do not need to explain your pain to someone who caused it, and you certainly do not need to beg for understanding. Instead, you hold your head high, speak with intention when you choose to speak, and walk away from conversations that no longer serve your well-being. This poise confuses someone who expects a scene. When you remove the drama, you remove their control. Clashes thrive on emotional entanglement. The moment you yell, plead, or defend yourself repeatedly to someone who's already made up their mind, you enter their territory, their emotional framework, but when you respond with class, you stay rooted in your own value system. You show that your sense of self is not determined by their behavior. You are not responding for them. You are responding as you. That alone disorients them. It pulls them out of the comfort of conflict and into the discomfort of introspection. This doesn't mean you don't speak up or assert boundaries. In fact, classy communication is deeply assertive. It just doesn't require shouting. You can say, "I no longer wish to continue this conversation," and mean it. You can walk away mid-argument not as a sign of disrespect, but as a signal that your peace is non-negotiable. You can say, "I deserve better," and not to wound them, but to remind yourself, class is not passive. It is powerful. It says, "I have nothing to prove. I only have myself to protect." Responding with class also reframes your own healing. instead of ruminating over how to win or prove your worth to someone who couldn't see it. You focus on living in a way that aligns with your values. You refine your routines, your relationships, and your responses. You become mindful of how you carry yourself because you realize that your energy leaves a lasting impression, even in moments of conflict. Class is not for show, it's a standard, and holding that standard, especially when tested, is what sets you apart. Think about the energy you carry in the days and weeks after being hurt. When you walk into a room, do you want people to see someone who is still tangled in someone else's chaos? Or do you want them to feel the calm confidence of someone who chose peace over petty? There's a reason graceful detachment is more impactful than retaliation. One makes a scene, the other leaves a legacy. Moreover, when you respond with class, you build credibility with yourself. You become someone you can respect. You prove to yourself that you do not need to lose control to be powerful, that you can choose silence without being weak, that you can set a boundary without raising your voice, that you can feel deeply and still act wisely. This self-trust becomes the foundation for all your future relationships because you no longer fear losing your center. It's also worth noting how rare this behavior is. In a world saturated with oversharing, impulsive reactions, and emotional theatrics, your composure becomes a quiet rebellion. It's the woman who doesn't post a cryptic quote after a breakup. The woman who doesn't call 10 times or demand closure through tears. The woman who doesn't retaliate, but simply removes herself with calm finality. That is the woman people remember, not because she caused a scene, but because she didn't have to. And for the person who hurt you, this response is confusing on every level. Not only did they not get the chaos they expected, they now face the realization that they lost someone who operated on a higher emotional frequency. That is not easy to forget. Time passes, and while other people may react in predictable patterns, your grace remains distinct. You handled betrayal without bitterness. You ended the chapter without burning the book. That kind of emotional maturity stands out. Let's not mistake responding with class as a tactic only meant to confuse someone else. The real purpose is internal. It's about aligning your behavior with your highest self, even when provoked. It's about not allowing someone else's bad behavior to pull you out of character. You maintain your standard because it's who you are, not because it will change them. And ironically, it's often the classiest responses that leave the deepest impact, because they expose the contrast between who you are and who they chose to be. In the end, you don't need to fight for your worth. You need to embody it, your silence, your boundaries, your self-possession. These do all the speaking for you, and long after the dust settles, long after they've moved on or tried to return, it is your calm, composed exit that echoes in their memory. Not because you made a scene, but because you made a statement. I am not here to compete, to clash, or to convince. I am here to walk with grace, even through the fire. When someone hurts you, the most powerful thing you can do is not to retaliate, plead, or try to win them back. Instead, you confuse them, and more importantly, empower yourself. By choosing a response they never expected, emotional mastery. Through silence, self-investment, elevation, and poise, you move in a way that commands respect without asking for it. You shift the focus away from them and redirect it fully toward your own growth, refinement, and peace. Silence becomes your shield, not your surrender. It unsettles those who anticipated a reaction and centers you in your own healing. Elevation becomes your quiet revenge, not out of spite, but as a commitment to yourself. You rise not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right about who you are and who you are becoming. And when you operate with class over conflict, you preserve your dignity while teaching a silent lesson in self. self-worth, let them be confused. Let them wonder how you stayed so composed, so radiant, so unbothered. Let your transformation be the answer they will never receive directly, because ultimately, the most unforgettable response to being hurt is not what you say, it's who you become in the aftermath. Let that woman be your greatest response. And let her rise quietly, confidently, and entirely on her own terms.